Holy shike, let's talk about pigs. Here's your host of the Pork Podcast, Jennifer Shike.
There's just something about the story behind the story. And as a storyteller, I'm always searching for ways to give readers just a little bit more. And that's what the Pork Podcast is all about, bringing you stories of the people and the progress of the pork industry. I'm Jennifer Shike. Let's go find just a little bit more. Well, my first day on the job with Farm Journal's Pork included an interview with Dr. Scott Dee. Since that first interview back in 2018, he's not only been a trusted source and a great supporter, but he's also become a good friend. Welcome to the Pork Podcast, Dr. Dee.
Thanks, Jennifer. I remember that day. That was a lot of fun to meet you. And I still have a copy of that journal that you published with my picture on the cover. So that was a real honor for me. So thank you.
Well, it was a real honor for me. It was such a great way to kind of break into the industry. The Layman Swine Conference is not the easiest thing to just get dumped into for your first day on the job. And so you helped me bring it back to the personal side of our industry, which matters so much to me, and getting to know the people who make our industry so great. So I really appreciate that. And I love your story. I'll never forget you talking about being rejected from veterinary school twice. And so, as we've discussed, it would have been easy for you, as you call yourself a self-proclaimed city boy, to just change your mind and decide, hey, obviously vet school's not for me, but you didn't give up that easily. And I'd love for you to share a little bit with us. Why didn't you, and what made you try another time?
Yeah. So, you can't make that stuff up, can you? Yeah, but it's true. I had to apply 3 times, and I received the rejection letter 2 years in a row in the mail, skinny little white envelope, and it's not a good piece of news inside. But I guess I wanted to be a vet since I was 5, and I'm from the city, as you mentioned. Really only knew about dogs, and that's what I thought I would do. But spent some time on farms and got to know about pigs and got to work with pigs and pig producers. And that's, I think, what really solidified my interest in agriculture, was meeting farmers and getting to know farmers. And they kind of got a kick out of me because I kind of came from left field on just about everything, not knowing a lot of things about the farm. So I might ask some silly questions or make some crazy statements, but they seemed to get a kick out of it, and it worked out all right. So I enjoyed those people a lot, and that's really important too. This is a people business. We deal with animals, but we deal more with people as veterinarians. I also met some wonderful people at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine, because when I was rejected, my plan was to go to grad school as a backup in veterinary microbiology and get that advanced degree, and also kind of build a network within the university and kind of hopefully meet some faculty that could motivate me. And what do you know? Who did I meet? Al Layman, Carlos Pijuan, Hansu Ju, Bob Morrison, Tom Molitor, and the list goes on. All of those Hall of Famers from Minnesota at that time. So, Al Layman, he could have talked me into working on camels. He was so motivational. I would have done anything he asked me to do. But pigs were it. So off I went. And that was it. Full speed ahead. That's all I've ever done. And finally, I guess the last thing is I just never surrender, as you titled our original article we did. I just had a chip on my shoulder by that time, and I was not going to give up. No way. So I just kept pushing, and what do you know? It worked out.
Well, and we're so glad that it did. I think about your story too, and I'm amazed how you've kept going all these years, because it certainly wasn't an easy time in the pork industry when you finished vet school and went out to the real world. So talk to us a little bit about that period of your career when you were just getting started, and what was the state of the swine industry like at that time, particularly as it relates to swine health?
Yeah, the industry at that time was very different than it is now. So for young veterinarians or young producers that weren't around back in the late 80s, everything was one site production, and the farms overall were quite small. 1,000 sow farm was huge. Most farms were 200 to 500 sows, and all the buildings were on one site. And it was a very bacterial, disease-focused industry. Viruses didn't play a big role in the health programs at that time, other than pseudorabies, which was a regulatory disease. And that's what we had to kind of keep our eye on every month as we blood tested for that. But most of the time we were dealing with things like Actinobacillus pleuropneumonia, atrophic rhinitis, Streptococcus suis, Mycoplasma pneumoniae, Pasteurella multocida, bacterial diseases. There really weren't many viral diseases, and there certainly was nothing like PRRS. It hadn't emerged yet.
Mhm. So I'd love to spend some time digging in a little bit more about PRRS specifically, because obviously this disease has been a part of your life for a very long time. You've battled it from many angles, and you learned a lot as along the way. But I guess as we get started, let's take a look back. And what do you think are some of the key things that we can learn from the past when it comes to PRRS?
Yeah, so I think in the industry, either the veterinary profession or the swine industry, I've probably worked with this disease as long, if not longer than most. So when I came out of school, as I mentioned, it had not yet emerged. The next year or so it did, in what's called mystery swine disease, which was a real disaster. And eventually it was discovered that it was the PRRS virus, and off we went. But to your question about what can we learn from the past, is one of the most disappointing experiences I ever had in my career so far. My almost 37-year career is how the industry fought each other, especially the veterinarians in the early days of mystery swine disease, trying to figure out what it was. Nobody knew what it was. There were certain camps of researchers that thought they had the silver bullet as far as what bug it was. And there was no sharing. There was no collaboration. There was no working together. And it was a very disappointing thing to see as a new graduate coming out of veterinary school and watching all of these scientists just fight each other and actually go to meetings and say, I'm not going to tell you what we're working on right now. So that was, fortunately, I haven't seen that since, but that was a real eye opener for me. That was a real bad time.
Mhm. Well, it certainly isn't the case today, is it? Because no matter where I go, it seems like every meeting has some bit of a PRRS topic somewhere in the lineup. And I really enjoyed the conversation that took place at the layman conference this fall, where, kind of three different perspectives on PRRS. You guys all came together and discussed your viewpoint of it. And so, I guess the big takeaway that I get from all of the conversations is just that it is always changing, and it is a really tough enemy to beat. And it's certainly not for a lack of trying and a creativity in our industry. But I guess as you look at where we're at today, how would you describe the state of PRRS today? Kind of like where are we at right now?
Sure. Great question. So if you asked me this question about a year ago, I would have been very negative, saying that we don't have any idea what to do. We're really struggling. The virus is winning the war all the time. This year, though, as you're familiar with, we've put out a couple of new papers where we've shown we've solved a very important problem, and that's the problem of area spread of the virus. So now we can eliminate the virus, and we can also now keep it out. But I think with that piece of information, plus all the other great work that other people have done, such as we have PRRS negative genetics, we have very good vaccines, modified live vaccines, very effective. We have great diagnostics, PCR tests, so we can get the results in a day. We've got wonderful surveillance techniques with the oral fluids population based. And now we've got the biosecurity plan where we put all this together, all of those tools in the toolbox, and we use that. And it's still not perfect, but it shows that we can really take PRRS incidence, so the percent of farm infections each year, down from, say, 50% down below 10%, which is a huge step forward. So I think we have everything we need at this point to start talking about what do we do now and what do we do in the future.
So I'd love to just dig in just a little bit with you. In my most recent article that I worked on with you in October, you talked about that 3-year study. So could you maybe just give us, I know we maybe don't have enough time to go into all the specific details, but you learned a lot, and I think that study also is a pretty pivotal one for our industry because it puts down onto paper a lot of the work that you've poured your heart into over the last, we'll just say few years. And, talk to me about that study and I guess the significance that it could play in our industry right now.
Sure. So that's, I think, a very important couple of papers, and they should be read in one after the other, because it talks about a 3-year project that I led at Pipestone, along with the Pipestone veterinarians and the Pipestone system. And basically, we took the whole company, which was 75 breeding farms, close to 400,000 sows, and for 3 years, we measured the effect of evidence-based biosecurity protocols on reducing the percentage of new infections every year. Evidence-based defined as using a protocol to prevent viral entry that has been scientifically validated in an experiment. So we're not making things up. We're not swagging it. We're using protocols that have actually been proven in a research setting and shown to be effective. And so we take all of that together. We take all of the other things that we just talked about, the negative genetics, the vaccines, the diagnostics, the surveillance. We put that all together and we follow that over time across this big system. And we showed, pretty strikingly that we could take the overall infection risk or the level of infection across that entire company below 10% for 3 years in a row. 8% incidence risk was the final outcome when we looked at all 3 years averaged across that period of time, all those farms. That's a big, big step forward. So to me, it shows us that we have what we need. We know what we need to know, and we can now move forward with the next conversation on what we do with PRRS.
So do you think that what you guys found through your study is applicable to other farms? And I guess, I think I know the answer to that, but I think some could also say, well, maybe you have more tools or maybe you have a better system. So talk to me about why is that research real boots in the field research that can help everybody, not just Pipestone in this case?
Sure. Well, one of the things we did, and I credit the Pipestone culture, was we wanted to publish that and release it for everyone to read. And so, no, you don't have to pay for it. You can just get it online and you can just get those papers. So that's pretty nice too. I really think a lot of what we did is applicable not only to PRRS, but it's applicable to other diseases. Within the system, we see less PED now. We see less mycoplasma. We see less influenza. So this goes beyond pigs and PRRS. And yeah, it takes a lot of work. It takes investment. There was air filtration in the model. So we learned that's a very important part of the biosecurity plan, along with a feed biosecurity plan, what I call a mechanical-based plan, looking at all the fomite routes of risks such as transport, people's boots, supplies, and then of course the breeding stock and semen has to be free. So there's a lot in there that people can do. You can look at your source of breeding stock, you can look at your mechanical biosecurity risks, you can look at air filtration. Is that an option for you? That's very standard these days. We've published all that too. And then the feed, that's something that you can look at too. So really, this is nothing rocket science. It's just taking everything we've learned, and we know it's valid, it's been validated scientifically, and put it into a program. And of course, we have to audit it. We have to really train the employees. We have to take care of the people aspect. But there's nothing really magical about what we did. We simply looked at the information we had, we applied it, and then we measured it to see if it did anything.
We will be right back after this message from our sponsor.
Hey, I'm visiting with Elanco Swine Technical Consultant, Dr. Jessica Risser today. Welcome to the Pork Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jennifer.
Well, Elanco is bringing a new swine respiratory disease injectable to the market. Can you tell me a little bit about Predilex?
Yeah, so Predilex was approved earlier this year by the FDA for treatment of swine respiratory disease. It's the first unique injectable antibiotic that's been approved by the FDA in some time. Pradofloxacin is the active ingredient, and it's a novel third-generation fluoroquinolone. And fluoroquinolone would be the antibiotic class in which Predilex fits into.
So what can customers expect as far as how fast this antibiotic will start helping and how fast it leaves the system?
Yeah, Pradalex relies upon high drug levels to rapidly kill bacteria. So it reaches a high serum concentration within 45 minutes of administration to inhibit the DNA and RNA synthesis of the bacteria. And then it's eliminated as the same active ingredient, pradofloxacin, from the treated animal within 2 days. So the labeled withdrawal time is 2 days. So these characteristics of Pradalex and the judicious use by veterinarians and producers really lend itself to maintain its effectiveness for years to come. Some other ways that veterinarians and producers can think about judicious use of antibiotics that can help us with this, and not just with Pradalex, but other antibiotics as well, is making sure that we seek management practices that prevent disease, prioritizing the quality of water, the quantity of water that we provide pigs, the quantity and quality of feed, and just the air, proper ventilation, right? All of those are going to reduce stress, reduce disease occurrence, and reduce our need for antibiotics. Other preventive health practices such as vaccination programs also help to reduce disease and improve the effectiveness of antibiotics. With Pradalex being an injectable antibiotic, it's really important to also remember the timing and recognizing individual animals that need to be treated quickly. If we can catch them early in the clinical signs, then the likelihood that they're going to respond to a treatment is higher. And then we need to communicate as producers with our veterinarian if the prevalence of the number of animals that we're individually treating reaches a certain level, then they may be able to help us with other tools from the toolbox that are administered through the feed or water to help alleviate some of those clinical signs due to respiratory disease. And lastly, it's always important as producers to follow our veterinarian's instructions.
So many great reminders. I just want to say thanks again, Dr. Risser, for joining us on the Pork Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And I know that, you are not just only looking at your own work, of course. You've also spent a lot of time reading research from other researchers and other universities to learn, what they're doing to move the needle forward. So I hear you say this, so let's talk a little bit about that. You say that we have the tools that we need to succeed. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we have enough knowledge and we have products that we can combine with that knowledge to start moving the needle. And so I'll just say PIC. And PIC back in 2000, they cleaned up all their pyramids, and all of a sudden you could buy negative breeding stock and get negative semen. That was a huge step forward, and I compliment them. I'll also say the same thing about Topics Northfin and all the other genetics companies, because everyone has to be free of PRRS now. So a lot of credit to those companies. The vaccines, we've got great vaccines. The Beringer vaccine, some of the other modified live vaccines, we tested them many times. We know they're very effective. They're much more effective than some of the other preparations. They're not perfect, but they do a good job. PCR diagnostics, they're very quick and accurate. Jeff Zimmerman and the whole oral fluid thing on surveillance, that's huge for us to help monitor the virus in populations. And then, of course, we've got biosecurity with what we call next generation biosecurity. But I think we've got everything we need to start moving forward. We might learn some more things along the way. We might improve on some of those tools. We might face a bump in the road along the way. But I think standing still and saying we can't do anything about this virus is the wrong attitude. I think we got to move forward and keep our spirits up and look at the great work that's been done across all of those people and all of those companies that I just briefly mentioned. So it's a real team effort.
Yeah, and I love that reminder that it's a team effort, that it takes everybody working together, because admittedly, you're supposed to be in retirement now. It doesn't really feel like you've been in retirement from my perspective of the work that I see that you continue to churn out and talk about, the meetings I keep seeing you at. So I'm not really sure that you're retired, but let's say, okay, even, you're trying to be retired here. What do you think when you look to the future when it comes to PRRS, where do you think the industry needs to go from here? Recognizing that maybe you're not planning to be the person carrying all that out anymore because you're supposed to be retiring, but what do you think are some of the things that we need to do next?
Yeah. So my wife would agree with you, Jennifer, 100%. But I still, I had a few things left to do before I eventually will get to full retirement, which technically I am, but as you can tell, there's a few things still happening. I had to finish this 3-year project that we've been talking about. I had to write those papers up and I had to get that out. And because I still have a great deal of passion for farmers, pig producers. They were the ones that welcomed me to the industry again from the city. And I owed it to that industry and those people to get that information out there so they can look at it and they can talk to the vet and they can kind of make a collective decision. What can we or can we not do? But at least they have the opportunity to study it and have everything at to their access. Where do we go from here? So I really believe the future for this virus is national elimination. I said that back when I was a president of the ASB back in 2006. That was a little bit ahead of its time. We didn't have everything we needed at that time. It was the right thing to say, but it was very tough to do, mostly because we couldn't stop the spread of the virus coming into newly repopulated farms that were negative, and now we're getting new strains, the area spread question. We didn't have the oral fluid surveillance technology at the time, but we got those pieces in place now. And I think what's really exciting is we also have US SHIP, the Swine Health Improvement Plan. And I know they started focusing first on foreign animal diseases, but I hear a lot of good conversation about using the US SHIP model for domestic diseases and perhaps certifying farms as free of PED or PRRS controlled or PRRS freedom or, whatever the nomenclature is, but start to give certification at certain levels of health or freedom from disease or control of disease in the US SHIP plan. I think that's a good way to use the project early on to kind of test it and see if it works and what are some of the kinks. Hopefully we never get ASF and have to worry about it, but at least we could start working on applying the US SHIP. And we didn't have that back in 2006 either. So I'm really excited about that. And I think it fits in perfectly with these advancements we've made in biosecurity, because now we can truly keep virus out of farms. It's not 100%, but we're a lot better than we used to be, and we'll continue to improve. So I guess that's having that driver, Jennifer, that just keeps me going. And I'll just kind of keep my ear to the ground and try to help when I can.
Well, I love that. I want to transition to this part where I share some thoughts that other people have about you, because I feel like, as a journalist, I always want to try to get some other perspectives worked into what I do. And so I thought, well, the podcast we should try to do that here too. So I reached out and talked to Monsi Torre-Morel, who's the department chair and professor in the Department of Veterinary Population Medicine at the University of Minnesota's College of Veterinary Medicine, perhaps one of the longest titles that you can have. She's an amazing person, and I appreciated what she had to say. She said, one thing that strikes me is that when you look at his career, his contributions have been many at multiple levels. But one thing I see undoubtedly is how he's helped advance biosecurity for the industry through his research on PRRS and applying very basic concepts on how virus gets transmitted. He was very powerful in basic protocols that people now take very seriously. He also took on air filtration and completely changed that industry. But I appreciate one of the things that she did. She specifically calls out your approach to analyzing really any problem. She says you are very creative in how you look at the problem, how you take it apart, and then you communicate what you find with producers, veterinarians, and others in the industry to really affect change. And I know that you and I have discussed left brain versus right brain before. And so I wanted to get into that just a little bit. How do you think creativity ties into your approach as a scientist?
Well, I got to catch my breath a little bit after those comments from Muncie, because that was very kind of her. And I've known her since 1993. So that's really nice of her to say. And I'm going to throw one back at her. I said, I mentioned that PIC had led the cleanup of their company from PRRS back in the early 2000s. Muncie led that project. And so we have to give her a lot of credit, along with Bill Christensen and Jer Geiger, all those great people who cleaned up that company and showed that you can do it. So back at you, Monty. So thanks a million. So that's really nice. Gosh, I kind of catch my breath here for a minute. But yeah, the right brain, left brain is a fun topic, and I appreciated your time talking about it with me. It might not be something you immediately want to talk about if you're in the position you're in, but yeah, you always seem to be looking for new ideas and things, as I appreciate that. Yeah, I think as we know, the right side of the brain is the creative side. That's arts. It's where your arts come from, basically. The left side is your cognitive side. That's your math and your science. And sometimes they don't work together, but some people, I think I'm one of those people that works together, because I can see something with my right side, and then my left side can take that question that the right side raises and turn it into experiment. So the classic one I always use is, I see snow and ice under a truck, and that truck's just left the packing plant. Is there a virus in that snow and ice under that truck? And can that truck then move that virus from place to place? And of course, that's the snowball from hell study that kind of started the whole mechanical risk understanding of PRRS. And so that's how I work. I'll see something in the field that looks really weird, and I'll just ask, does that really work? Or why are we doing that? Is there science to support it? If not, let's test it. And then the left side will take it and set up the experiment with all the replications and things. So I think the right side comes from, I'm a musician, so you can see the Beatles in the background. So I'm a big Beatles fan. I'm still a performing musician. And so, yeah, I'm really strong on the right side. So I think that helps in this case.
Yeah, I do too. And I mean, what I love is that we need people who approach problems from lots of different angles. And I also think, sometimes people who, just as a parent, I just think like, we sometimes try to pigeonhole people into areas based on where we think their strengths may lie. But I love the reminder in your story that there's some pretty cool ways that they can work together. And while some people maybe originally saw you years and years ago as this kind of right brain, creative type, music and so forth, all these things that you do that maybe is not traditional when you think of the term scientist. I mean, you've found a way to bridge all that together in a way that's very powerful, I think. So
thank you.
I guess there's opportunities for all types of brains and minds in our industry. And I just wanted to bring that out. And, another thing I think that you are so good at is communicating your research. You are not afraid to talk to the media. You're not afraid to give people a call and share your ideas. I do think some scientists shy away from that a little bit, and you have prioritized it. So I'm curious, why do you think it's so important to communicate your research with journalists and with the world?
Well, you're exactly right. That's a very important strength our industry has. We have several outstanding journalists, and you are one of the best in the industry. We're lucky we have multiple journalists who will always take your call and always want to listen. And so I use it as a strength. I see it as an advantage, because really good reporting, we always get a chance to check our work and make sure we like what you wrote. And that's really nice. We know it's going to be accurate and transparent when it's published. And then to me, it's a real advantage, because then the article can go on tour. And the article, be it a web page or be it a hard copy, that can go on tour and share the news. And I don't have to go everywhere and tell the story. I'll let the article go on tour, or the podcast go on tour. And that's, to me, a real advantage as far as time management, getting the word out and educating through the media, versus me just trying to run from podium to podium and never get anything done. So I just see you and the other editors that I deal with, other journalists, very, very strong advantage for our industry.
Well, I think you spend all this time doing this work, and you want it to help more than just, your company, your business. You want it to go change, because we all are in this together. And I've heard you say that many times before too. what your neighbor does impacts what you're dealing with. So we kind of need to continue to approach this united, and
Yeah.
communication helps get that out, I guess.
It does. It does. And to me, I'm always, looking. So we just, we have these papers and we give this talk, and then where does it go from there? And so we need it to be communicated, as you're saying, and we got a great pipeline with you and the others to get that done. I also think the other thing that I'm going to be looking at coming down the road is how do we use science to write policy to improve the health and well-being of not just pigs, but also other animals. That's one of the things I'm working on now as a delegate from Minnesota to the American Veterinary Medical Association, about how do we take what we learned in the 3-year study on evidence-based biosecurity, how do we write that into policy? And so there's a guidance document, there's educational documents that veterinarians can look at and say, okay, this is what this is all about, and here's some links to these papers, and let's read about it and learn. So actually, I've got a resolution coming to vote at the House of Delegates at the AVMA in January on this exact topic. And if it all goes well, that will be a policy then we can build on and start doing some things with the theme of evidence-based biosecurity, and take it beyond pigs and PRRS and take it to other species and help all veterinarians and all creatures, great and small. So that's just another way I think we can communicate and use our science to better the world.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, that's exciting to hear, and such an important connection for sure. So, I mean, of course, I couldn't do this without speaking to who. I had to reach your longtime friend, Dr. Gordon Spronk, who, when I
Yes.
met you, I met kind of both of you together that week, and you both have been very instrumental in helping me gain knowledge and awareness and perspective in our industry. So I really appreciate that about you both. And I always get a kick out of kind of listening to you banter back and forth. But he did have a lot. He said there was a lot of things that we could get into, but we decided that we were only going to talk about, the things that were, the right things to talk about on this podcast. So we're not going to get anything too embarrassing here, but he did share that he said your ability to take field observations, and he loved that he could just plop down across from you and say, hey, I'm seeing this problem in the field. And then your mind would start going, and then you would perform research at the highest level. And he emphasized highest, because he said it's pretty hard to find somebody who can get what's going on in the field, who can do that research at the very highest level. But then you publish those findings for everybody to benefit from. And he thinks that makes you unique in the industry. He doesn't think there's anybody who really can take those 3 levels like you do, and bring those together. And so that documenting the science has really been a big part of your impact in the area of swine research. I mean, you have been one of the foremost at getting that science documented for others to benefit from. So I guess I just wanted to share that he said that. I thought was a great perspective as well. I know he meant a lot to you as well, but I guess as you look back on your time in the industry, what are you most grateful for?
Well, I'm grateful for people like Gordon. First of all, he's a big brother to me. And so veterinarians like Gordon Spronk come along once in a lifetime. And I was happy to be at the right place at the right time to meet him. And I give Gordon a lot of credit. So Gordon reached out to me when I was just starting the filtration work, and he wanted to filter the first big sow barn. And I was at the university at the time. And so we started working together there. So he kind of got that started. He also came back to me. He'd been at his brother Randy's feed mill one day, and he said, I just found a bag of choline that came from China 2 weeks ago. And PED obviously had been rolling around the industry. He says, is there any way that bag of choline could have had PED? Aha, good idea. Let's check it out. And he was a great part, as you know, of the 3-year study. He's on the paper, both papers on the 3-year project. So guys like Gordon come along once in a lifetime, and I was just so lucky to have him as a friend and a colleague. But what I've really loved about the industry, to your question, is the farmers. And I kind of opened the discussion about wanting to take care of farmers and help farmers. And they were so friendly to me when I first came out of school and not knowing much. And they took really good care of me. So I have a great deal of love in my heart for the pork producers in the United States, in Canada, all over the world. I've never really met a pork producer that I don't get along with. So I guess that's a lot of the things I've really appreciated most about the industry are the people, be it a veterinarian like Gordon or the wonderful pork producers that I've had the luxury to deal with.
I've been thinking about that a lot lately, and you think about what you do and why you do it. And for me, it comes back to the people too. I can't deny that being in this industry is so meaningful and special to me because of who the people are.
Mhm.
And their just desire to learn. Like they are hungry to get better. They're not okay with like just
Right.
being average. And I love that because I'm not either. And
Mhm.
I love that they challenge me to do better work all the time because they're always trying to do better work. And so I think it's been a great industry to be a part of. And you no doubt have made a huge impact on it that's going to be felt forever. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank
I've
you.
been looking forward to visiting with you since the idea of a podcast came to be, and you were one of the first people I talked to about it, to see what you thought. And so thank you for making time to be here with us. And I just want to let everybody who's listening know that you can dive into more of the Pork Podcast on Farm Journal's YouTube channel, or you can listen to it anywhere podcasts are found. I'm Jennifer Scheich, finding the story behind the story.